going live any second. Hello, ladies and gents. So we should be live and streaming, and hopefully there will be some of you in the chat to say hello to us. So do go ahead if you're watching and go and press the say something in the chat button. And hello, there we go. Alwyn Kuravilla is saying hello. That's fantastic. So we've got a bunch of people on. I'm currently not on the YouTube page, so I can't see how many of you there are in total, but that's all right. So at the moment, here being our mentee for the day is Greg, and Greg is as you were just telling me, Greg, working on his own version of the RPG, and he's going to be taking it in different directions, particularly in the multiplayer direction. So we're going to be talking to Greg, and if there are any other any other proteges or mentees who are wanting to have their slot, then they will be coming on in a bit, and if not, it will be Greg, and we might end a bit early, or we might go on a little bit longer with Greg, seeing how we're going, and potentially answering your questions in the Q&A in the chat as well. Okay, Greg, so do you want to share your screen and we can start with code reviewing?
Yes, I will. So, hello everyone in the chat.
Yeah, so in case anyone's confused, I'm not Ben with longer hair. I am Sam, and I'm doing the mentee, being the mentor for today, helping out Greg. So hopefully I'll be able to pick up where Ben's left off with this.
Yes, all right. So my first question is around, I'm implementing or trying to implement a mini-map.
Yes.
And what I want to do is for enemy types, I want to replace, I don't know if you can see my screen here in the corner, I've got a white blob representing the player. I'm just using a simple top-down camera to do the mini-map.
Yep.
But what I want to be able to do is when there's an enemy to actually represent that as a red blob or a red circle.
Yep.
Where I'm getting stuck, and I'll just go to the code for it, is doing a conversion from the 3D, I suppose, distance between where the player is and where the enemy is,
yep,
to that representation on the 2D canvas.
Right.
I tried doing it by saying, you know, the ratio is this in the X and this in the Z, but that doesn't seem to be right. So is there a good way of converting from the 3D space into a 2D space?
There often is a way to get from a world space to screen space location. So just 1 second, Greg, because Perceptual Lucidity is saying that I've got some streaming issues, and I just wanted to double check that I've got nothing on my machine's end that's doing this. No, it seems to be all right. Hopefully, if you watch it just a little bit behind, guys, it might be a little bit better, but do let me know if it continues to be a problem. So the ratio thing that you're mentioning here, to me, does feel like it should work. The only problem is what you've got going on here is more of a trigonometric problem. So the ratios like this work when you've got the arc of a circle. So because we'd be talking about radians. So
yes,
if you've got the arc of a circle, you've got like two lines. This one points to the center of your camera. This line points to the enemy in question. Then the distance between those circularly could be given by basically just a multiplication factor of the radial distance, or a division factor, in going the other way. So saying, you know, if I've got the arc, then I can figure out what the angle is. So what you'd be doing here is more trigonometric, because you're saying that you're looking down onto
the
well,
scene.
so you're looking down onto the scene, and the scene's flat, right? So what I'm considering here is you've probably got a camera that looks less like a cone and more like a
Yes.
box, right?
Yes, I'll find it.
You'll have.
It's actually childed to the player.
Is it orthographic in settings or?
No, it's still perspective.
Okay, so it is a perspective camera. So I would still expect it to behave like that. It's going to be trigonometric. Yes, so that makes sense. So, I mean, one thing you could do is you could consider having it orthographic. Is one thing, but is this all? Let's forget to get the higher level. The aim here is to put red dots on your players.
On enemies.
On enemies.
And eventually to put sort of like a green or a yellow dot on quest objectives when you get close to them in the mini-map.
Yeah.
Also things like gathering nodes showing up on your mini-map for gathering materials out in the world, that kind of thing. So starting with enemies because it's a natural place to start, but wanting to get the math right so that it will work whatever type of
so I'm just trying to think at the moment whether there is off the top of my head, whether there's any built-in solution in Unity. I can't think of one. I know there's definitely something in Unreal, which doesn't help you very much. But there is, I'm fairly sure there'll be something in Unity as well that converts from world space to screen space, and it probably is on the camera itself. I would go and try this right now. If you get hold of the camera and do just like an exploratory search in Visual Studio, if you do like camera dot something, do we have anything that converts from world space to screen space or something like that? That's what I would expect, where I would expect it to be.
Okay, minimap camera. Okay, well I'm grabbing it as a game object. You're talking about just camera.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely has to be of camera type so that we can see.
Camera dot.
Camera to world matrix is useful already because that tells you that we've got a way of converting back if we need it. Yes. But I think there might be something better.
Focal length. Orthographic mode.
It's more likely to be a function. Screen to viewport, screen to world point. So that's going one way. So that's going from, if we've got a 2D coordinate to the world point. So I'd very much imagine that there is a world point to screen.
There you go. World to screen point, world to viewport point.
Excellent. Okay. So that's going to be the kind of thing that I think we're looking for. Return is a vector 3, but who knows? Maybe that gives you some element of depth to it, so you know whether it's in front or behind. So hopefully that's something that could help you out there.
Okay.
Another alternative, if you don't want to do the rendering in 2D, is that a little hack that we did on a hackathon with Rick and Ben for Ludum Dare. We did quite a few months ago now. Is that you can put the kind of the red dots as little discs over the top of the enemy's head.
Right. Okay.
And
so
you can just
have
put
it
in 3D. And you can have that dot over the enemy's head, in 3D, or maybe it's a canvas or whatever in the world. Either way, something that renders to the camera, and then you can put that on its own layer that gets ignored by your main game camera, but gets showed by the minimap camera. So you can use layers in Unity to achieve the same effect, and that might be easier than having to write a second kind of rendering mechanism in here.
Yes, Perceptual's just saying on the stream, put markers on the objects you want.
There you go. Perceptual's beating me to
exactly what.
Yeah. So both of them are valid because you may want to, for example, have a perspective camera like you're currently doing, but then have your markers be orthographic, not be affected by the perspective at all. So if you wanted to achieve that effect, then you can't really do that with the markers in the game world.
Yes. Okay. All right. So I'll play around with that.
Yeah, definitely have a go with that. See whether that fulfills the requirement for you, because if so, that's much easier.
Yes. Yeah. Than trying to do some sort of random math conversion.
Yeah.
Um, mm. Okay. Now my second question was around an item system. I haven't seen your latest update yet, so I'm not sure what you've brought
It's
in.
not an item system yet. That's definitely on the horizon, but it's not what I've done yet.
Okay. What I'm looking at, well, the way I'm currently looking at it is setting up items as scriptable objects.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Now, in a previous stream, um, Ben made the comment about constantly instantiating and destroying objects can lead to a lot of fragmented memory.
Hmm.
If you do have your items as scriptable objects, how do you deal with that? Is there any type of inbuilt garbage collection that you can run for scriptable objects?
Well, a scriptable object for a start, if you, let me just think. I believe that every instance you're creating on disk of the scriptable object is pretty much the scriptable objects that are going to be loaded into memory. So what happens is from one of your mono behaviors, you have a link to a scriptable object, right?
Yes.
And that's a scriptable object asset on disk. So what happens is when the scene's being loaded, it goes through all the mono behaviors and looks at all the asset references, and it loads in all the asset references. In the case of scriptable objects, that means loading in the data that's in a in that serialized object, instantiating a new serialized object, scriptable object instance of the class, and then loading all the preset data into that class. So for every item that you have on disk, you'll only have one item in memory. It won't create for every sword that you have in the inventory a new item, you see. For that,
Right.
you're more likely to have a system where somewhere, I don't know, on some mono behavior, you've got an inventory mono behavior. And in that mono behavior, you've got an array or a list. And that's an array or list of pointers to scriptable objects. So if you've got 3 swords, they're all going to point to the same sword scriptable object because they all share that same config of the sword. Now, where that
Yes.
might change is if you've got a sword that can have, I don't know, maybe it gets worn out over time as you use it and eventually will break, because that's then not a fact. It's not data relating to the sword class as a whole. That's data relating to this particular sword instance. But in general, in the inventory, you might just say the important bit of information is that I have a sword of this class, or I have 2 of the swords of this class. And in that case, you shouldn't have much of a memory fragmentation issue, because when Unity loads in the scene, it's going to load in all those things, probably one after another, to be honest. It'll probably go through your inventory and say, oh, list, we need to bring all those things in. So they will be together in memory as well, which should lead to faster access time. But, talking about memory optimization is definitely a much more advanced topic, and probably something you'd only really want to look into if you're really reaching the boundaries of performance.
Yes. Yeah. I just wasn't. It was just a comment that Ben made, because originally my quest icons over the top of my quest givers where I was instantiating a prefab and then destroying it,
Yeah,
depending on what state the quest was in.
yeah,
Whereas I've moved to more of a component model where I just enable and disable the relevant component.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, there is definitely a cost to destroying things. And it's not just the cost of the memory allocation. I think there is just some more heavyweight cost involved in Unity when they create new game objects. I'm not entirely sure what it is, because I haven't looked too deeply into it, but I believe that destroying an instantiation can be quite expensive operations in general in most engines. Definitely. So yeah, perceptual lucidity is also mentioning addressable assets. I really haven't looked much into addressable assets, so I can't say whether they're useful to you or not. But I think they're a more recent feature of Unity. Perceptual lucidity might be able to shed some light on that in the chat, but you might want to have a look into that as well.
Yeah.
along
See
these
which
lines.
way is going to be best for it.
But I would suggest, just stick with the simplest stuff. To be honest, I think you've got, prefabs for weapons is a great starting point. I can't specifically speak to the thing that Ben was talking about in the last stream, but yeah, I would go with a simple solution. Figure out where it's going wrong first, and maybe keep it in the back of your mind that there's this memory fragmentation issue that is a potential, but don't worry too much about it. Basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, until it becomes a problem.
Exactly. Yeah. Just what I would do is get in the habit of having a FPS counter showing all the time when you're playing your game. Then you'll have in the back of your head, you'll always be like, oh yeah, it's always hitting that FPS. And then when you make a change where the FPS suddenly drops, you know instantly what it is you did that dropped the FPS. And that can be super helpful. Rather than saying, I'll deal with performance somewhere down the line, it can be a real nightmare then, because you're like, well, where is this performance bug? Whereas if you've literally just done something and the FPS dropped by half, then you can be like, oh, hang on, this thing needs to be addressed a little bit more intelligently. Or you make a note in the commit that this thing you've just done is probably what's causing the drop in frame rate and needs to be revisited or something. You can put a to-do in or whatever.
Yes. So you're talking about an FPS counter that's, I suppose, separate from the stats tab in the game window?
Just having the stats tab open, literally, that'll do. All I'm saying is get in the habit of keeping an eye on the stats.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Now, I might go back to a question that I asked last time
Sure.
around the serialization system you've got for saving.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben did actually answer this saying that yes, probably, but just maybe to clarify with yourself, would it also work if you're pushing the data out to an external database rather than onto disk?
Yes, I think so. So, let me just flip over to my other screen. In fact, I can share this with you so that we can have a look at my code base and I can show you. Okay, so are you seeing this?
Yes, I am.
Oh, fabulous.
The stream is.
The stream is too, I think. Okie doke. So let me just check that the stream's seeing everything as well. Yeah, I think so. That's looking good. Okay. Right. So let's find, where did I put those serialization classes? So core, saving, okay, serializable, save load. This is the one. It's the main class of the bunch. So the key thing that's going on here is all the clever gubbins around serialization is actually happening in the binary formatter, and this comes from C# itself, so it's not even a Unity thing. And what we're doing is that any object that wants to be serialized has to return a type that is serializable. So we have this iSerialize interface, this iSavable, interface, and basically that just tells an object to save its state into a dictionary or to restore itself from a dictionary. So that's obviously, a dictionary is an incredibly versatile piece of kit because you can pretty much save most objects in a dictionary, because you can say, every variable I want, I give it a different string reference and I can just pop it in, and if that variable itself is serializable, then the whole dictionary is serializable. So there's some mucking around you have to do for certain types. So I have this serializable vector3. I had to create basically a clone of the vector3 to allow us to serialize Unity's vector3s, because they're not C# serializable by default, which is really weird because they are Unity serializable, they're just not C# serializable. So you have to do some mucking around like that. But once you've done that, the really nice thing about the binary formatter is that it does just produce binary. So you can go ahead and save that, whether that's in a file, in an external database, whatever you like. And the C# serialization format in general can not only export to binary formatters, but I think using some external libraries, or you can, I think by default you can export also to XML, but using some external libraries you can export to JSON in exactly the same way. So that, it depends what kind of database are you thinking of saving into. Is this for the multiplayer type stuff?
Yeah, so while the game is predominantly single player, players will still be logging on to a server, um, uh, and which is backed by a MySQL database. Currently, I've kind of got that very simply in place, and I've actually got, and excuse the crudity, although you're
I'm
sharing.
sharing. Let me just stop there. You can share yours again. So
Yes,
I made
but
the
I
point
will
I needed to make.
show you very crudely. Oh, hang on, now what does that happen? Oh, there we go. No, how does that happen when the camera's not lined up with the canvas?
I'm still not seeing the screen, so.
Oh, okay, it might have unshared. Oh no, it's still saying that it's
Oh,
shared.
really? Okay, I've got it now. Yep, got it now.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I'll move these down because it looks like my assets have moved somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now I've got to remember the password that I said. I think that was it.
Very secure password.
Your credentials, yes, might have been welcome.
Too secure.
And again, yes, no, credentials are not recognised. But anyway, so essentially, this is hooking into a web-hosted solution that has a MySQL database at the back end, and
Cool.
when I remember the right credentials, it will actually log in and retrieve all of the different characters for the player, and then when clicking on a particular character slot, it will then retrieve the.
I'm kind of trying to save everything into one big binary blob. And on your end, what you probably need to do is save it down to the kind of minimum block that can be requested at a time, so that
Yes.
your save system doesn't take an eternity to load from the server, but rather, I'm in level 1, so get all the things that are relevant to my character and level 1. But that's definitely not hard to do. You just have to find a way of stratifying the save system a little bit, which isn't, you can characterize it in terms of the save system needs to go and get the characters stuff, and it needs to go and get the current world stuff.
Yes.
And yeah, you'll have to write UI around it to some extent, or you'll have to figure out how that's going to work anyway. So there will have to be some logic there. It can't just be automatic, if you see what I'm saying.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, it looks like my time's up, and then there's someone else who is waiting. So.
Is there? I think Ben was
Ben
saying.
just said in the chat.
I think it's if there's a second protege. Is there someone else?
Oh, if there's.
Yeah, I think it's an if.
Oh, okay.
Now we can
Well,
keep going.
anyway,
we can keep going
well,
a little
no,
bit.
I'm actually kind of at a logical point
logical
here,
stopping point.
and my 2-year-old daughter's just walked into the room. So
a very logical stopping point.
Yes, I'll say thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Greg, for coming on and sharing the problem with us and having us talk over it.
Yep. Okay, I will stop my sharing and let you get on with the rest of the stream. Thanks.
Yes. Well, so it might be quite a short stream because if we have any other proteges is an if at the moment. And yes, I think Ben is mentioning that we're considering moving to an offline format. So just for note towards people, at the moment we're not got a second stream, the next stream scheduled, and it might be offline to allow us to edit it down, to allow us to maybe allow for people who are less comfortable doing this stuff online to do it offline with us. So that's one potential option. Perceptual Lucidity seems to think that's a good idea in terms of the offline thing. But otherwise, if we don't have any other proteges for this evening, I think we will end the stream early rather than try and drag it on or try and find something else that I haven't prepared to show you guys. Thank you very much, Musu. Thank you very much for your problem, for having the courage to come and do that in front of people. I think that's very brave and very good. Yeah. So otherwise, I will open up to any questions. Just do a quick Q&A in the chat, and when that comes to a natural conclusion, we can wrap up for this evening. So. Anything that you would like to ask me, or Ben seems to be in the chat as well. Maybe if there's anything that you'd like to ask Ben, or more generally, I can try and speak for anyone else, but that would be putting words in their mouth. So do let me know. Do shout out in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer. And maybe in the meantime, I can try and show you some of the cool RPG stuff. I have shared this in a video just recently, so some of you may have seen it if you are RPG aficionados, but for those of you who aren't, let me just show you what I've been doing. Perceptual Lucidity, you have a question. So for now, I'm planning on doing just the uploaded ones. I'd like to know your opinion, because obviously a live stream, is about an hour of content to watch, and a video takes me maybe just a little bit less to produce, but it's much, much shorter for you guys to watch, and I feel like it probably includes a lot of the same content. But I would be interested in knowing, what do you think of the video format? Have you watched it yet, for example? Or is it something about live that you prefer in particular? Yes, as Ben's saying, Liz, we're not planning on doing the ECS, certainly not for the RPG just yet, because there's no real need to. It's not going to be lots and lots of entities in the world. I think ECS works really well when your performance crippled by the masses of entities in the world. If you've seen their demos, they've got like armies of thousands of instances clashing, and it's just a way of doing really lightweight game objects and component systems that work very well, highly parallelized, basically, allowing you to make full use of multi-core CPUs and so on. But when most of your games are going to be bottlenecked by the GPU rather than the CPU, it's kind of not worth it, and that's kind of the case that we've got with the RPG, to be honest. Dan Bijo, thank you very much for supporting us on Twitch. That's great. You're free to support us on Twitch. Obviously, the money there comes to us. You're also free to support us on Patreon. I think Patreon at the moment, if you're using Prime, then I guess that's not costing you any extra. Thank you very much for doing that. So the interactive brainstorming. So perceptual lucidity, you are saying that you prefer the interactive nature. That's good to know. What part of the problem for us is that when we do a live stream, at the moment, the number of people who get to benefit from the live stream is very minimal. We get often less than 20 people participating, whereas when we do a video, that can go out to a lot more people, and if they don't have to they don't get the benefit of participating live, but if they have to, so they don't get the benefit of participating live, but what they get to do is watch the video, and if they have to watch an hour of video for something that could have been 10 minutes of content, that's what we're trying to balance up. So obviously asking the question to folks on the live stream is going to give a little bit of a biased answer in terms of whether you prefer live streams or not. But yeah, so I think that's part of the trade-off that we're going for. We'll try a few more of the short form videos. If we really feel like we're missing the live stream format, then definitely we can bring it back. I don't think it makes too much of a difference to me either way in terms of how I produce it. It's really more of a question for the students who are benefiting from a shorter form video and weighing that off against the benefits of having the live interaction as well. Maybe we'll do Ask Me Anythings more often on the RPG subject, or I will come on Ask Me Anythings more often, and we can talk a bit about that sort of stuff. Liz, yeah, we could put in bookmarks and time markers. We could also edit down a stream. That is a potential, but it's never quite the same as if I just produce it to be short. If I produce it to be short, then I get straight to the point. If we're having a long form discussion, then there's going to be a long form discussion. So we could do live, pre-recorded, both edited down. There is a spectrum of options available to us, definitely at the moment. Ben's Crag Wizards asking Ben what else they need to create. Yeah, you can definitely continue the conversation around YouTube. So that's the nice thing about the YouTube videos, is because it gets more engagement from people, you get more comments. So there is kind of a longer tail of discussions going on there. And I definitely read those comments and definitely participate in those comment discussions. It's interesting that YouTube doesn't tell you that we're on, because I've definitely had notifications from YouTube in the past. Maybe they've got less aggressive with that. Maybe that's just an advantage of Twitch. So we've got some questions going on for Ben at the moment about his PWA current focus. Yeah, so Ben has got lots of things to be working on. We've got all of us lots of things to be working on always. But with that, I think we've got a drying up of questions and currently a drying up of mentees as well. So I'm going to call it a night. It's getting 9:30. It is a sensible time to call it a night as well, I think, work-wise. And yeah, if there's any last minute questions, ask them now. I might take one more question and then head off. Okay, so no questions coming in. So I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you very much again to Greg for having the courage to come on and talk to us live. That's really awesome. Thank you very much for doing that, Greg. And thank you all to everyone in the chat for participating, for shouting out, and for your contributions today. That was really lovely. So I will say goodbye for now, and I will see you on the next live stream or video that you'll be interacting with me with, and I look forward to it. See you there.